Hey students, it's Mrs. T, and in this video you are going to take notes as usual, but you're creating a study guide that goes all the way back to chapters 1 through 3, back to the first unit that we had in this semester, and we're going to review some topics that you see on the board here. Now I've only just got the bare bones minimum on the board here, and I'm going to give you some instructions in this video to go back and fill in some gaps so that you can study and prepare before we take our last 100-point assignment or exam in our finals week. I've taken a couple of practice quizzes in Respondus Lockdown Browser by now, and some of the points that you're going to earn on your last 100-point assignment are going to come from a Lockdown Browser activity where you have to answer questions without your notes, without your study guide, without your textbook open. And I know that for the 100-point assignments we've done in class up to now, some or all of them have been open book, open notes, and you've figured stuff out and answered questions and written things and cited your notes, but at least some of this last 100-point assignment is going to be closed book, closed note. Okay, so let's get to this. And so the questions on the Respondus Lockdown Browser portion of our last unit assignment are primarily going to focus on our course learning outcome number 1. It's a multiple part learning outcome, so there's several different components that you're going to need in your study guide, and they're listed here as items 1 through 4. So let me start with sociological perspective. Please make sure you leave a whole lot of space when you're taking notes on this as I'm speaking to you, so that you can go back and fill it in with information from your textbook, information from the video lecture notes that you already have in your Google Doc or in your physical notebook that you've made all semester. But what you're going to need to know and to do and to figure out about the sociological perspective is the fact that this is the macro to micro connection that we've discussed so many times, not just back in chapters 1 through 3, but every single lecture. Can you think of a lecture when I didn't talk to you about a macro and micro connection? And that's what the sociological perspective is all about. Now, the words macro and micro connection are not the definition of a sociological perspective, so I need you to go back and make sure that you identify some clearly precisely written sentences or two so that you could provide a definition for the sociological perspective if you were asked to do so. At least what you're going to need to be able to do is identify a scenario that applies to the definition. So commit that definition to memory so that when you see a question about the sociological perspective, or 2 or 3 questions, you're able to know clearly what it is that question is referring to, and that'll make it so much easier for you to figure out which of the choices is appropriate for that particular question. So there's a couple of things that I have on the board here that go with the sociological perspective. Social institutions, social structure, those things. Actually, social structure was chapters like 4 through 6 and in module 2, but all of these notes that you have on these topics are going to give you insight into that sociological perspective that we talked about so often at the beginning of the semester. So this is item 1 on the study guide that you're going to make for yourself, and you need to go back and get the definition at least and read the section in chapter 1 at least about the sociological perspective, so you are prepared to answer those multiple choice or matching or true-false questions that apply to this particular part of our course learning outcome number 1. Okay? And number 2 is about social institutions. Okay, so social institutions are elements of the macro scale part of social structure that take care of the needs that society has. That's not a very concise or well-written definition, so don't write me down verbatim. Make sure that you can jot down some notes about what I just said, stop me, back me up, and write it down. But make sure that you go to your textbook, to your notes that we originally have from that first unit, and get the definition of what a social institution is. I've got examples on the board to show you, and of course we have covered many of these extensively. Social stratification, for instance, was the topic of the entire Module 3 that we just finished. Usually, as you know by now, I don't write the definition down on the board for you when we're covering new topics. I ask you to do that, or to take the pieces of the discussion that I've presented to you and write some sentences for yourself, because your beautiful brain can do that kind of thing. That's what synthesizing information is all about. And so what you need to do is not only write yourself a definition of what the sociological perspective is, but also write yourself a definition of what social institutions are, and then at least these social institutions that I have given you as examples here on the board, then write down a sociological definition of these things. Not a definition that you're going to find in dictionary.com. That doesn't have any sociological value. Not a definition of something you're going to find on psychology.net or whatever that site is that so many of you like to use as references in your reflection journals. No, this is a sociology class, so don't look to a psychology definition of something. Don't look to just a general public definition of something in the dictionary. We want a sociological definition of family, which is what one of the next videos is going to cover. That you're going to watch and take notes on in this particular unit. So family and economy, we're going to really look at how economics is connected with family structure in our particular society. And like I said, we're going to also look at religion, social stratification. All of these different things are all connected. That's part of the definition of social institution, just like all the systems within your body are connected. You've got your respiratory system, your nervous system, your circulatory system, etc. And so, keep on going, and all those things are connected. If your respiratory system wasn't connected with your circulatory system, you'd be gone, honey. I don't want you gone. Society would be gone as we know it if these things weren't connected in the ways that we're familiar with, that we grew up learning about in our socialization process. Ooh, there's another one that I don't have on the board here, but the socialization process is giant. I mean, it's on the board because it's in our first 3 chapters. Is what you need to review here, and chapter 3 is all about socialization. But socialization is giant here because we learn about these connections accidentally through life experience as we come up in the world, during our upbringing in the world. And so make sure that you also add, I guess, a number 5 to the list here, socialization, the socialization process. I'm not talking about taking your dog to the dog park so he can socialize or get socialization with other dogs. No, there is a particular sociological definition of that word, and this is your sociology final, and so I need you to be very, very careful about using words correctly with the sociological standpoint, the sociological viewpoint or perspective. You have to start with this and then use the definitions, use the concepts in a sociological way in order to be able to comprehend these things and have like a higher order thinking in what you're doing. Okay, another thing that we talked about way early on, I want to say it was like week 1 or 2, we talked about sociological theories, and we have been talking about research methods and sociological theories, both 3 and 4, constantly throughout the semester. So you have to go back to unit 1 and get your notes from about functionalism. I don't have that written on the board, but you need to put that in your notes now. Functionalism or structural functionalism, those words are interchangeable. And this is a sociological point of view with structural functionalism. Don't look it up in general on Google and try to get a definition, because other disciplines like psychology or anthropology use that same word, and they have kind of like a twist. They have like a psychology twist and an anthropology twist to it. Sociology looks at structural functionalism or functionalism. Those are interchangeable in a particular way. So put like a bullet point under sociological theories. The first bullet point, functionalism. Our second bullet point is conflict theory or social conflict theory, whichever way you want to refer to it. We say typically conflict theory in our class. Those are macro scale theories, those 2 theories. And another one that we've had extensive notes on so far is symbolic interactionism. Okay, so those three theories you should at least be familiar to your ears. You've had questions on quizzes about those kinds of things. I've asked you major point getting questions about those things on some of your unit assignments that you've done already. But the fourth big four theory, postmodernism. We'll need to know a definition, how to describe what postmodernism is. So please take this opportunity now to go back to Chapter 1 in our textbook, where you are first introduced to our sociological theories, and get a good working definition in your mind of what postmodernism is. Essentially, postmodernism is a theory that looks at the other three theories that you've got extensive notes about already. It looks at functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. And it essentially is the mindset that these are old-fashioned theories that do not cover some of the modern day issues that we have in society. So go back to your textbook and read that, at least that introductory section in chapter 1 about postmodernism, because there will be at least one question, maybe two questions, where you need to identify a postmodernist point of view, or identify the definition of postmodernism in comparison to the other three. Be able to distinguish postmodernist point of view from symbolic interactionism, conflict theory, or functionalism, for instance. Okay, so you've got some work to do there. Research methods. This is also a giant section in chapter 1, and we've talked about many different types of research methods over the course of the semester. So we didn't just visit this once in unit 1, we've talked about it many different times. But let me recall to your mind what the items are that you should look for in your textbook and in your notes. In the sociological perspective, we don't just suppose we have the right idea about something. We have to gather data, we have to analyze that data, we have to do research, and then evaluate and analyze that information before we can draw conclusions that are trustworthy, conclusions that you can rely on as having some basis in fact. And in order to do that, we have to conduct research using the scientific method, just like a biologist does or a chemist does. We have to conduct research with approved of research methods. And in sociology, we can look at things like participant observation, the definition of which sounds exactly like what the words are. If you participate in something, you take part, and if you observe something, you see what's happening around you. And so participant observation is one of the things that needs to be on this list for what you research and what you study and define in your study guide for research methods. Participant observation. Participant observation takes a long time to do in order for you to get like really detailed and in-depth kind of descriptions and rich experiences that happen in certain ritualistic settings, certainly, or job places. What's the experience really like in a job? And so I love this one section in chapter 1. I think we talked about it before, on the Hawthorne effect. This is a phenomenon that happens to you and me if we know our boss or some authority figure. If we know that our boss is at work during our shift, does our behavior differ during that shift than if we were just with our peer co-workers and there wasn't a supervisor there to observe our things, our behaviors, our patterns that we engage in? And the answer is yes. A guy named Mr. Hawthorne observed that and wrote about it, and that's why we have his name on the Hawthorne effect. But participant observation is something that you would be able to observe the changes and the nuances. You would be able to see the richness of that power differential between, oh, this is a really friendly supervisor and they seem to get along really well with their staff, but does the staff have a behavior change essentially when that supervisor is there? And you would notice that kind of detail in your participant observation if that's the research method that you were using to try to find out what life is like on a particular job, for instance, or any other kind of situation where there's like a lot of details of human behavior that you're not going to find from, say, a survey, for instance. And so surveys and questionnaires, those are also an item that you need to define and discuss and review on your study guide. I might have told you the story of, I think it was Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley back in the 1990s, wanted to know about cheating habits among college students, and so they decided that the best way to do this was an anonymous questionnaire. And you might agree with them right away. Yes, anonymous is the only way that perhaps people are going to give you accurate information about a topic like cheating, which is not approved of, right? It is not approved of in any kind of school setting, but we're talking about college students, right? And so as the story goes, they did an anonymous survey, an anonymous questionnaire that you could volunteer to answer, and they had to be very, very careful with choosing their questions so they didn't have a bias in their, in the data that they collected. They couldn't just have an opening question that said, how often do you cheat in college? Because what if you have it in your hands and you're somebody who's never cheated in college? You cheated in high school maybe, but not in college, and so you're not even going to answer the questions for me. I need to give you an out. So I need to maybe start to say, have you ever cheated in college? Yes or no? If yes, answer these next questions. But I need to collect that data from you. The no answer is data I need to collect from you also. So you have to ethically, with peer review and help from a lot of people, figure out what kind of questions, what's your approach going to be if survey or questionnaire is the research method that you decide is the best way to collect the kind of data that you want to collect. You can't really do the participant observation thing if you want to know about cheating behavior on college campuses. How many participant observers would you have to have, and how many years do you have to send them to the classroom to observe? And cheating is a behavior that you kind of want to hide anyway, so will they observe it necessarily? No. And so you have to discern, you have to figure out which type of research method is the best in order to be able to do the kind of research that you want to do. Experiments, put that on your list as another research method. We can't really do experiments in ethical ways, not entirely, in sociology, and so we usually avoid experiments when we're talking about like profound topics such as the nature versus nurture debate. If you go back to the video in, let me see, that's chapter 3, probably week 4 or 5, where we talked about the nature versus nurture debate and the wild child, Jeannie the wild child, and some of the other feral children that unfortunately have been discovered throughout the decades and centuries. That gives us data and information about the nature versus nurture debate, but we can't set up an experiment where we take 10 babies over here and 10 babies over there and we interact with these 10 babies in our quote-unquote normal way, and these babies over here we just like shove food under the door and then open the door when they're 20 and see what happens. That's criminal. Like, there are so many laws against that kind of thing. It's ridiculous. It's a silly thing for me to even use as an example, because ethics is something that we absolutely must consider. We're studying human beings. We have to make sure that we are realistic with what we ask human beings to do. We have to disclose and get informed consent from people to participate in our research methods. And then we're back to that Hawthorne effect, because if it's something sensitive that maybe I don't want to be judged on, I might not give you my true self, like your social media page, your social media platform might not exactly give you the what real life actually looks like, right? And so you have to be careful and choose ethically what your research method is going to be. So yeah, experimentations and surveys and participant observations and questionnaires and all of those different kinds. Oh, secondary analysis. I knew I was leaving one off. Secondary analysis. Put that on here also, because when we talked about Emile Durkheim and the social facts before the Industrial Revolution and the social facts after the Industrial Revolution, we focused on the fact that he used a secondary analysis to come up with his conclusions. questions. He didn't live during the time period when the Industrial Revolution, before and after. It wasn't his personal experiences he was writing about. He went back to records that the government kept, the churches kept, the hospitals kept. He went back, the criminal justice system kept. He went back to records that were on file, and he looked at those records and came up with statistics and then drew a conclusion from those statistics. And so make sure you put secondary analysis on here also, because there will be questions about each of those different, at least one question about each of those 4 different research methods for you to answer on that closed book, closed notes, Respondus Lockdown Browser section of our last unit assignment for the semester. So please text me if you have any questions. Make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to do this in advance of that Respondus Lockdown Browser quiz. It's going to be timed. You'll have something like 40 questions or fewer. I'm thinking maybe 25 questions, so that you'll have like half of your points from your unit assignment come from that lockdown browser activity. So yeah, make sure that you have all of this done and you're able to have like a study cram session, whatever works for you, the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes before you take that lockdown browser section of our final, because you'll have it timed. It's going to be a 2-hour time frame. And yeah, you need to make sure that you can just get it done, and the questions are not foreign to you. They shouldn't be if you go through this and do what I'm asking you to do in this video. They shouldn't be foreign to you, and I know you're gonna do great, and I want you to text me with questions. And yeah, that's all for this video.